This week, Prince Harry launched a savage attack on the press for bullying Meghan and announced he's suing a newspaper for printing a private letter to her dad. This is an ill-timed, ill-judged mistake, not least because their Africa tour was a triumph, and for their critics, me being one of them, it reminded us just what an asset they can be. Look, I get why Harry wants to protect his wife, but it's disingenuous and wrong to say that what happened to his mum is now happening to Meghan. It's not. Diana was hounded unmercifully by the media. I know, I was there. But that's not what's happening to Meghan. She and Harry are shielded and protected precisely because of what happened to Diana. Yes, they've rightly been accused of hypocrisy on climate change, their use of public money and their demands for privacy. But that's not bullying. That's being called out and challenged. And if they wade into controversial issues, then they must expect that from the media, not fawning sycophancy. The tragedy here, that Africa tour had restored their damaged reputation. Now, all the great stuff they did will be destroyed in the war Harry just declared on the press.
We've seen the attitude the media has had towards Meghan, especially since their marriage. We've seen the racist conspiracies that come at her left, right and centre. We've seen that there was a couple about last year, the BBC did an article on the fact that she opened her own car door. The extent to which she is hounded by the press cannot be understated. So I think for somebody who lost his mother due to that, I think it's totally understandable that he would be upset.
Well, let me first answer. So you're saying that everything that's been levelled at Meghan this week is about racism. What is this? You just said a racist conspiracy. What is that? What are you talking about?
Well, as in people are suggesting that there was the idea that it was a fake pregnancy. People have...
That's on Twitter. That's not in the press.
Right. You know, the Palace actually said the same thing. The Palace was forced to issue in 2016
because of Twitter.
A statement talking about the racial overtones of the level of abuse she was getting. And Prince Harry himself, who I have to say, if anyone knows about press hounding the royals, he should know, right? So I trust what he says. Okay. But just to finish, he's talked as well about unconscious bias that affects the way people talk about Meghan, that people don't really understand why they're saying what they're saying. So he's somebody who's referenced this as well. I think it would be really weird not to acknowledge that there is a racial tone to the abuse that she gets, especially since the Palace themselves have said so.
Okay, so I think that's absolute nonsense. And I think you can't apply any racist accusations against the criticism they've had over climate change. Are you saying it's because she's mixed race? They've criticised what her and Harry have said over climate change, about their moaning about privacy, about their attitude to the public in this country?
Can I also
Nick,
make one point here? We just ought to be clear. The press did not kill Princess Diana. She was in an underpass being driven in a car by a drunk. He was a big drunk. That's why Princess Diana died, and she didn't have her seatbelt on in the car either. So I think we ought to divorce the idea that the press killed Princess Diana. Now, the criticism the press have got here about the Duchess of Sussex, the Duchess of Sussex, is we hardly ever see her. We hardly ever see her. We only saw Archie, the little boy, for the first time in Africa. And as for the letter, which is the nub of the writ against the Mail on Sunday, that was a private letter she sent to her father. He gave that to the Mail on Sunday. He didn't sell it to them. They didn't steal it from him. They didn't prise it out of his hands. And he gave it to them because there'd been a really destructive article about him in People magazine in the United States. And who put it there? 3 of Meghan Markle's friends. You can't have it both ways, Femi.
Nick.
I think we're running 2 or 3 horses here. There has been a racial aspect, but honestly, I don't think that's the press. I think that's where you look at some horrific trolling that has gone on. I think now, if you recall how the media as a whole celebrated that wedding just over a year ago, so I would suggest that the ugly and indefensible one, you cannot lay at the door of the media or the press. Also, it's not the press's fault that, sadly, the Duchess, Meghan, has a fractured relationship with her father. Again, the newspapers are not to blame for that. Where I do have some sympathy is that, obviously, as you said, Carole, Harry is acting as any husband would because he won't put up with it. And I would say this, I do think an unnecessary caustic tone did start to get injected in towards treatment of the Duchess. And with Harry, as Andrew rightly said, we can all remember the horrific events of how his mother died. I think he was 12 at the time. He has an extraordinary place in the heart of this nation because we watched him as a little boy.
But don't you think, though, that I think because Meghan and Harry seem to have taken it upon themselves to handle their own PR, it's been catastrophic. You know, we heard that they had a new fancy pants PR organisation, but today we read that actually they had nothing to do, that Harry didn't tell them, he didn't tell his dad, he didn't tell the Queen, he didn't tell Wills. Now, if you remember a few, because they would have said absolutely not, remember a few years ago when Will sewed over those topless pictures of Kate? Absolutely justified in suing the press on that. This is not justified. Rachel.
I just want to read out some of the headlines that we've seen about Meghan Markle recently. And by the way, the Palace in 2016, they referred to the racial undertones of comment pieces. So that is 3 years ago. So that is actually the media. But looking at the headlines, we have Meghan Markle moans about life in the public eye. Meghan Markle is the worst kind of snob. Meghan is accused of looking childish. You know, these are not headlines that suggest a kind of neutral observation about her. And when it's one after the other, when it's constant, as it has been, it's hardly a surprise that they are taking the steps that they are.
There's no racial element to those headlines you just read out at all.
The criticism they've had, Rachel, has been over hypocrisy. It's not been over race or anything else. It's the hypocrisy on preaching to the rest of us about climate change, saying every carbon footprint counts, and then taking 4 private planes in the space of a month. It's their hypocrisy on talking about poverty and then having 300 grand parties in America, taking George Clooney's jet to get there. It's hypocrisy that has grated with people.
Maybe helpful if we actually just tell some viewers a little, because they might not be across fully what Prince Harry has said. So this is what he said in that letter. My wife has become one of the latest victims of a British tabloid press that wages campaigns against individuals with no thought to the consequences, a ruthless campaign that has escalated over the past year. My deepest fear is history repeating itself. I've seen what happens when someone I love is commoditised to the point that they are no longer treated or seen as a real person. I lost my mother, and now I watch my wife falling victim to the same powerful forces, to which the Mail on Sunday, the newspaper that published this letter, responds. The Mail on Sunday stands by the story it published, and we're defending this case vigorously. Specifically, we categorically deny the Duchess's letter was edited in any way that changed its meaning. That's one of his central claims.
I suppose the thing that really grates with me on this is that the idea that Meghan is being hounded. She's been afforded more protection than almost any royal that I can remember, precisely because of Diana. This is what Angela Levin, who was a royal biographer, had to say on this.
It's astonishing that it's now at the end of what has been an incredibly successful tour, when the press has been very kind, very positive. They've followed everything they wanted, from Meghan going to commemorate a young woman who was murdered, climate change, all sorts of things, and all cooing over baby Archie, which is all lovely. And then to sort of take the focus totally away from what's been very successful is very strange.
And I think this is part of the problem for them. They're not listening to the people around them.
Do you think the media will change, Andrew? You've been part of the royal pack once. Do you think they'll change their tone?
I think I do not recognise the description of that Harry is painting in that letter. Sorry, Rachel, he gave no examples in that very long statement of this daily harassment and pursuit of his wife.
It's interesting, and let me just...
you know, if Princess Diana set foot in the street, I know. She was descended on by photographers, and that stopped.
And we were there, you know. I was around for that. I was a royal reporter for that. I saw how she was hounded, and she was. But Diana handled the press very cleverly and very well. She used the press in exactly the same way as we used her, and I'm sure you've read examples of that today in the paper. And that's what worries me. Harry is... I think him and Meghan are just deciding what to do by themselves, and everything they've done so far has been a PR disaster.
I don't think we're going to...
Isn't it, really? 3 old press beasts here against these 2 people. I do apologise.
I don't think we're going to agree on that.